Today, we're not going to restore, but repurpose an old Cannondale road bike to a reliable commuter bike. Grab a snack and a drink, because this video dives deep into everything about this bike. Given the current state of affairs, what else do you have to do anyway? If you've been watching the last episode, I went and picked up this $10 road bike at a swap meet, and I thought it was going to be a great deal. I thought it'd be a great project for the channel to kind of rebuild it. I think what I'm going to do as a project is not keep it as a total road bike. I'm going to try to kind of convert it into like a hybrid commuter. And I just didn't really like the drop bars. This Criterium frame, everything kind of angles down, and I just didn't like the position that it was in. So I think I'm going to try to bring the bars up, put some flat bars on it. I'm trying to keep it as cost effective as I possibly can. Hopefully maybe keep the whole thing under $100. I have some parts ordered that are on the way, coming slow boat from China, and they told me it could be a month to get here. So this project's going to be ongoing for a little while. But in the meantime, what I was trying to do is just try to get a little history of what I actually have here. And it hasn't been real easy. I've gotten close, but I haven't really like hit the nail on the head yet. My initial research led me to believe that this is a 1988 SR 500 because of the fact that it says Criterium on the frame. And that seems to be the year that they introduced the Criterium frame in this color. However, some of the componentry doesn't really match that model when I cross-reference it to some of the stuff that I found online. The white SR 500 from 1988 has what they call the Shimano 105 series componentry. From what I can tell, best guess, this does not have the 105 componentry, but I have found on the cranks they say Shimano 600. On the website that I was looking at, this should say Shimano 105. Nothing with the 600 componentry came in white for that year. I just started digging around and was looking for other years, and I think I found the 1987 model of the Cannondale SR 600 carried the 600 series crankset, but the frame did not come in white, and it made no mention of being called a Criterium frame. One of the other things that I did discover is I could research the serial number, and what I learned was a 60 centimeter frame. This frame is huge, by the way. That was one of the things I noticed when I was riding it. I almost have to put the seat all the way down for my feet to reach the pedals. This is a ginormous frame. And then the next series of numbers is the date that it was manufactured. So 09/09/87. So this was made September 9th, 1987. This 87 was a good clue. Now, I don't know if that necessarily means that this was a 1987 model bike. Since it was manufactured in September, this could have been made in September, but was actually for the 1988 line of bikes. So I'm guessing that maybe the case here is, since this was a September model frame, this would have been an early 88 model frame to come out if it was for 88. Maybe at the time they kind of had a little bit of a Frankenstein of componentry. Maybe they took parts from perhaps the SR 600 from 87, put it on this bike, in the early run. I don't know. I'm just guessing. The other clue is that this comes with a 6-speed rear cog set, and a lot of the newer, anything in 1988, the 600 series, they call the 600 Ultegra, because there's a whole difference between the Ultegra versus the SIS. This definitely has stuff on it that mentions SIS. And then they went to 7-speed. So I feel like this is either an older model crankset that they put on a newer model frame, or someone may have just swapped it along the way. I mean, heck, this bike is 30 years old, so just because these parts are on it doesn't mean they're the original parts. I'm pretty sure the headset's been changed too. It's not in the best shape. I mean, it's got some bubbling on the paint, which is fine. I don't really care. I mean, as long as it's sturdy, this isn't going to be a showpiece. I just want to see if I can get it back on the road and reasonably functional. As you can see, I've torn it down, and then once our parts start coming in, we're going to put this baby together. I had a hell of a time finding the proper tool for this crankset. A standard socket that I have would not fit in this opening. It takes a 15 millimeter socket, which I think now it seemed like all the standard stuff these days is 14 millimeter. And when I try to put a 15 millimeter socket in there, it just wouldn't fit. So I can't even get that bolt loose. So I ordered a tool that actually has a 15 mil on one side and a 14 mil on the other. And thankfully it's got the same width on the exterior. So when I flip it to the 15 mil, she fits in. I'm gonna get these cranks pulled, see what's going on behind them, see what this bottom bracket looks like, get that cleaned up, and then I'm gonna get the frame cleaned up. And then we can start reassembling this thing. That should be in there. All right, let's try this. So in theory, now that we got this in, you screw this in, it pushes against the pin and should extract the crank. In theory. I think that's kind of breaks its moving, and there it is. All right, let's try side 2. All right, same deal. Ba-boom! All right, so like everything with this bike that I found so far, you always need some sort of tool, which I don't have. So I bought the tool for the cranks. It looks like there should be some sort of spline thing for this bottom bracket. I don't have that tool. I'm not going to buy that tool just for this. I don't think none of my other bikes have this bottom bracket, so I'm not going to buy it just to use one time. I think, one of the options that you can do, since it's just got these little grooves, is, you can just kind of hit it with a hammer and kind of, and a screwdriver and slowly work it around. I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way, and I'm just going to use a pair of vice grips. I don't recommend this. You might scratch your frame, but I'm not really too concerned about the paint job on this frame right now. If you have something that's worth a little bit more than 10 bucks, maybe it's worth investing in the tool, but here goes nothing. Well, that was pretty easy, I think. Okay. I'm not sure what's going to come out of this thing, so let's keep an eye out for any bearings, if there are any, which I don't see on this end. There's that. I'm going to flip this around. That's got some sort of flat surface. It needs to come out. Oh, man. There it is. It's going the wrong way. So this one is threaded the opposite way, it seems. Well, there is a set of bearings on this side. I'm just going to get this frame cleaned up, just see how bad it really is. Well, once I really started to check out the frame, the paint was flaking off in all the places it was bubbling. So I decided to repaint it. I gave the frame and fork a good sanding and got to painting. My other bikes are either gray or black, so I decided to give this one a splash of color and go with orange for 2 reasons. 1, it will hopefully make me more visible to motorists on the road, and 2, it's the colors of my favorite hometown baseball team, the always rebuilding Baltimore Orioles.
Something magic happens every time you go. You make the magic happen. The magic of Orioles baseball. When the game is close and the O's are hot, there's a thundering roar from...
Next, I tried to clean up and degunk all the parts, particularly the cranks and the bearings in the wheels and bottom bracket. Going through all the bearings was pretty straightforward. I got all the old grease cleaned out and started to repack them. I'm using some heavy-duty bearing grease. It would have probably been prudent to replace all the bearings, because there's no way these aren't a little worn. But like I said, this build is on a budget, and there were certain things I wanted to replace, like handlebars, which required I also purchase a new stem, and I needed to swap the pedals to platforms, so certain things are more of a wish list than a necessity. For now, they'll have to do. I was applying a thin coat of grease on all the threads. Hopefully, it will help at removal later down the road. There is a corrosion that happens over time when metal and aluminum are in contact that will start to kind of fuse the two. I found out the hard way. While I didn't get it on video, I had a heck of a time getting the aluminum stem out of the steel steerer tube of the fork. I was worried I was either going to have to leave them in or be buying new forks. Fortunately, some shear force and a bench vise did the trick. And yet another reason this bike needed to be repainted. Once again, there is a particular tool needed to adjust this bottom bracket. I made do with a couple of small hex wrenches that I could get into the tiny holes to adjust. The cranks have Biopace stamped on them, which in the 80s and 90s was Shimano's oval chainring technology. From what I've read, there is a love-hate for them. Mostly hate because people feel the oval is not in alignment with proper pedal stroke. I don't know how much or frankly care about it, so for the time being, I'm okay with keeping them. Here you can really see the oblong nature of the Biopace chain rings. I did see a video where you can rotate these chain rings to be more in line with modern oval technology, but for now, I want to ride them the way nature intended. Yay! I get to use my new tool one more time. This may be the last time I ever do. Money well spent. Packing the wheel bearings wasn't hard, but you have to pay attention to how everything came off, so you know the order to put it back on again. Thankfully, videotaping all this turned out to be a big help. These old bikes used what you call a freewheel cog set versus the free hub and cassette you see on today's bikes. I'm guessing the newer technology allows for more chain rings at a lighter weight. But these old things are durable, and switching it will require a whole new wheel hub makeover, and that sounds expensive. So again, it stays. I thought that maybe this wasn't the original headset, but when I was looking at some of the bikes from the 80s, I think this headset was original. The lock nut on the headset had some corrosion, but I'm pretty sure it's only cosmetic and won't hurt the functionality. The stem I went with has an adjustable angle. When I test rode this bike before the build, it was, to me, very uncomfortable. My hands on the bars felt way too low, and it put my head and neck in an uncomfortable position. So I knew I wanted to raise my riding position, and I thought this stem would be a good choice to experiment. These handlebars were an interesting story. Like many of the parts I ordered, these were Chinese made. The upside is they are dirt cheap, but the downside was the expected delivery window was a little over a month and a half. And that was before the coronavirus outbreak really started to take over the world. So about a week ago, I received a message from the seller informing me that they have no idea if the bars will ever arrive, and offered a refund so I could buy locally. The upside was they said if the bars happen to arrive, just keep them. No need to send them back. So who knows? Maybe I'll get a random pair of bars in the mail one day. Save them for another build one day, I guess. Ah, the Oriole bike is coming together. You think it's orange now. Wait till you see the grips. I was kind of dreading getting the cockpit assembled because of all the cabling, but so far it hasn't been too bad. The orange grips may be a bit too much, but I don't care. Let's get crazy. I'm all crazy with my crazy orange grips. I'm going to hold on to the clipless pedals that came with the bike in case I get the urge to switch over, but for now I'm going to stick with platforms. A few more touch-ups, get these gears working, and this baby is ready for the road. Moving the shifters from the down tube to the handlebars required a modification to convert the down tube shifter area to a cable route. Thankfully, such an item is available on Amazon, which made the conversion easy. But it also meant that a new cable and housing had to be measured and cut. At some point, my $9 Harbor Freight cable cutter just stopped working. That was disappointing because other brand cable cutters can get pricey, so apparently I got what I paid for. Lesson learned. But in the meantime, I had to get these cables cut. Sometimes when you buy a piece of tool, you gotta improvise. That's a satisfying feeling when the gears index the way they should. Admittedly, adjusting these isn't something I mess with very often, and I can find myself in adjustment hell. Getting the wheels and gears back on started to make it look like a bicycle once again. Going back to rim brakes is a bummer. I find them to be a pain to adjust. One side always seems to pull and the other side doesn't, and they just don't have the confidence of disc brakes. Disc brakes are a huge innovation in biking in the last 20 years, I think. If you're wondering why the cutters work here as to previously, that's because I shot these scenes in a different order.
So one of the things that I wanted to do was just kind of leave a little homage to the past, and I like this sticker down at the bottom that kind of, I guess, represents the bike shop from which it came from. And I wanted to leave that, so I intentionally didn't paint over that, and I thought it'd just be a cool little accent to the bike. And also, I didn't fully remove the sticker on the top tube. So when I painted over it, you can kind of make out the lettering. And I thought, you know, that'd be kind of cool that maybe 30 years from now, if someone else finds this bike and they're thinking to themselves, what do I have here? Well, I left some clues. That way they can kind of do their own research and kind of discover what happened to this bike and what it used to look like. And I just thought that'd be a fun little Easter egg.
We started here and ended here. There isn't much more to do than to get this baby out on the road.
All right, so sort of maiden voyage, putting this thing through its paces, taking it up on the local loop in my neighborhood. This is what I usually train on because it's got a nice hill, got 200 feet of elevation. Tries to get me in shape, and I'm out of shape. Someone forgot to tell me that the 19 in COVID-19 was actually the amount of pounds you're going to gain by sitting in the house all day. Feels good. Gearing's kind of hard, but I expected that.
The shifters feel a little clunky and outdated, but it was difficult finding a 6-speed shifter. Everything these days seems to start at 8, 9 speed and up. I've gotten a decent amount of riding in, so let's find a bench and share some thoughts.
So my thoughts so far on this bike, pretty good. Pros, she's light, seems fast, fairly comfortable. Raising the bars, putting flat bars on it with a little bit of a riser, I think was a great decision. It feels really good. I feel nice and upright. It's a very casual riding position. I don't plan on doing anything too intense with this. I think this is going to be the perfect kind of just commute around town bike if I want to go riding with friends or if I want to do a bike path. If I want to take it to the beach, I think this is going to be a great bike for that. I do definitely feel like I sit way on top of the bike, but I think that's to be kind of understood because it is a large frame. The 60 centimeter frame is big. If I were to buy this bike new, it definitely would be a smaller frame that I would go with. I do like the way the color turned out too. I mean, it's bold. She's orange, but I think it's cool. I think it works. I did want something a little bit with more of a splash of color compared to my other bikes, and definitely got that. What are the cons? Well, the gearing for one. It's, I guess, because this was originally set up to be a race bike, there's really not that easy of a gearing. Even in the easiest gear, it's still, compared to some of the mountain bike gears, you really got to push to go up some hills. The wheelbase is a little interesting because it's got a really short wheelbase and those front forks are pretty steep, and I find it, if depending on where my feet are in a pedal position, if I turn a certain way, that the front tire will actually catch the front of my foot and rub. So I mean, it's got a really narrow wheelbase, so I have to be mindful of that when I'm riding. But thankfully, usually I'm not doing, it's usually just when I'm kind of making a U-turn or something. I'm not doing anything at a high rate of speed where I'm turning the bars that far, so it shouldn't be a problem. But overall, I'm really digging it. I think this is going to be just a fun bike to have. Will I ride it every day? Probably not. In fact, I'll probably still keep riding my hardtail mountain bike. I was thinking that this bike was going to be easier to ride, so I didn't want to, as a trainer, I didn't want something easier. I actually prefer to have something a little bit harder to kind of force me to get into a little shape. But I might go back and forth and try each one of these and kind of get a feel on which one is the harder bike to ride, especially on hills, because that's where I need to work. I get so winded on hills. I always have. Even when I'm in good shape, hills are a struggle. But right now that I'm out of shape, oof, it is bad. It's bad. Putting this together, I've learned a lot about building bikes. I've learned a lot about road bikes, which I had no idea anything about. Working with the gearing and the derailleurs was interesting. painting a frame. I don't think I've ever painted a frame before. It's just been a blast from start to finish. And it's been a lot of work, more work than I really thought it was going to be, and a little bit more money than I thought it was going to be. I haven't even talked about that. Originally, I would try to spend less than $100 on this. That didn't happen. I want to say probably when it was all said and done, I was at least $180 into this, which still isn't bad. Not where I wanted to be, but you know, the thing started added up quick. You know, when you're spending 20 some bucks for pedals and the bars, I told the story earlier about the cheap bars that I wanted to get, and I ended up having to spend a little bit of money for bars. But even things like all the different, the cable and the housings and stuff added up. So it was a little bit more than what I wanted to spend. But, you know, when I look at this bike, when it was new at $600 and $1988, if you want to account for inflation, that's the equivalent of spending $1,300 in the year 2020. You know, if you want to look at it from that standpoint, I got $180 plus, you know, the $10 that I paid for it, $190 invested in it. Hard to find a decent riding bike under $200. I think it was money well spent. I think I got a value out of it, and hopefully, and I think this bike's going to last me a long time. You know, no complaints. Glad I spent the money. Glad I did the project. Thank you all for coming along on this journey with me. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked it, please hit that like button. Please hit subscribe to see other videos. I promise we'll be starting to do some more riding videos as the summer kind of rolls on. Maybe we can get past this whole coronavirus thing. We can get back out. And usually I sign off by saying stay young and ride safe. But I think I'm just going to say, you know, just stay safe. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.
Work from home is a way of life. Never thought I would see the day. Danger lurks on the other side.